I'm Imogen Lamport from 16 Style Types, and I and Jill Chivers will be going live chatting to you about the INTP, the style theorist, the complex stylist. Just adding Jill now. There we go. Jill is a second. And yes, here she is.
Here I am.
Welcome.
It's great to be here.
You got everything working. It's lovely when technology works.
It is. It is. It's always such a pleasure when that happens.
Yes. Hello, everybody who is watching. Sue, Lynn, anybody else who's here. We welcome you here today, and we'll be talking INTP, which is, what their approach to style, how, what you can learn from their approach, maybe some of their strengths and challenges as well. So, of course, if you have any questions, please do put them in the comments, and we will love to answer them. Just going to pop actually, so I get another screen open so I can see the comments, because sometimes it's a little bit hard to see it on a a tablet or a phone screen. So it's always good to have a computer screen as well showing me this at the same time.
Yes, doing these Facebook Lives, I tell you, sometimes it's not all roses and champagne doing this stuff. I'll often have a soup bowl propping something up, and I'll use masking tape to make sure the phone doesn't fall down. And I'm sure if you were looking at it, you'd think, what are these people doing?
Yes.
So I know you have multiple screens. You're on the Starship Enterprise there. You are with all of your screens in front of you.
Yes. So if you see me looking away, it's because I'm actually reading something on a screen to keep it all going.
Yes, that's right. You're not posting about the whippets.
No, not right this second. Haven't actually taken any photos today. What's wrong?
Oh, you better get on to that as soon as we get off.
I will. They'll do something cute soon enough, I'm sure.
Oh. Probably during this Facebook Live.
Yes, yeah. No, hopefully not. Hopefully they'll just stay. Oh, actually now Ari's got his head stuck in the curtain.
Oh dear.
So yeah.
Endless entertainment they are. Who needs Netflix when you have two whippet puppies?
Yes, that is true. Just taking a photo there. He has seriously got his head. He's ripped a hole in the net curtain. He's now got his head stuck through it.
Oh dear.
Well, you want to play dress up? So, who knows? What type is your whippet,
Yes, well, at type conferences, this is often a conversation that comes up. I'll never forget Sue Blair, who's a wonderful type practitioner and author of some terrific resources in New Zealand, has preferences for ESTJ and was our ESTJ Style Muse. And she was telling us about a session that she ran and asking people, do you type your animals? And someone in the audience declared that their tortoise had INTP preferences. That was one of the funniest things I've ever heard in relationship to type, and so relevant to what we're about to talk. Now, that is not to say that all tortoises have preferences for INTP. Who knows? They could have all kinds of type. But that one apparently did.
Like to do some brainstorming with her, really?
I don't know. Was a deep conceptual thinker, perhaps, which is what's so interesting about INTPs is so much of what is interesting and going on for them we don't see. This is one of the natures of INTPs, is that rich inner world and how much they enjoy being in it. And I remember a corporate workshop where someone with a preference for INTP said, the biggest question I have to answer to sort of come out into the world is why? What would be the reason for that? And because they don't have this same need to connect with people in the way that other types often do, their inner world can be a place that they're very comfortable being in without coming out too much at all. So that's another interesting thing about some INTPs.
Yes, they definitely are probably often seen as one of the more introverted types, like more obviously introverted types, versus there are some introverted types that can be seen as more extroverted, just as there are some extroverted types that can be seen as more introverted. That the INTP is, you're generally not going to mistake them for an extrovert.
Yeah, and that's a really good point.
Hat on.
Well, even then, the way they socialise does tend to
Yes.
indicate a very strong preference for introversion, and
Mm.
and the whole idea that we all access all behaviours, or we all are capable of accessing all behaviours, is a really good one, because the older we get, the more behaviours we've accumulated, the more skills we have, the more experiences in life we have. But that is true about INTPs. You generally do not have any confusion about the first letter in their type code, and they don't either if they've
Yes.
understood the type principles, which is also another interesting element of INTPs, is if they are on board with the
Yes.
concept, the theory, the thing being discussed, they will often be very focused, or sometimes almost sort of doggedly focused on something. They become enthralled with ideas and
Mm.
theories, and the beauty and intricacy of a structure and a set of principles. If they have no interest in it, then there'll just be a blank space where their opinion might be. They're just not going
Yes.
to engage. But
Mm.
if they are, they will really be fascinated with it. The INTPs that I have known in the type world are often very scholarly. Even if they're not
Oh,
a typical
yes.
scholar in a scholarly sense, as
Mm.
in a university, they have that sort of scholarly approach to anything that they find intriguing. It's one of the things that you can sort of pick up from a behavioral perspective, which is often tricky
Yes.
to do, but you can see that with them.
Yes. So now tell me, Jill, why did we call this one the complex stylist, the style theorist?
Well, it has nothing to do with real estate, for those of you who are wondering
No.
whether it has to do with the complex. It's because of the way that they think and the approach that they have, the way of being that INTPs have. And of course, we are doing our best to use our type knowledge to describe something that often has indescribable elements to it. So we are pointing at things that we know about and we see. So if you're an INTP watching this and your experience is at variance to this, then that's because everyone does type differently. Every INTP shows up differently in the world. So we're just using our best knowledge to describe it. But those of
So
you who are
neither of us
looking for gaps,
neither of us
neither of
are
us are.
INTPs, so we don't have
No,
that personal experience either.
no, that's exactly right. But that complexity thinking, the way that they think, and they almost sort of have a matrix in their brain. They
Mm.
have a very systems and principles based way of looking at things. I can sort of consider them sort of the matrix or the 3D Excel or spreadsheeters of the world. The way that they create this structure into which information goes, and they are the type who, to learn something as it applies to them, most need to understand the entire system. So often what you'll see with them is this striving need for knowledge about the entire system. And others who don't have that need or that preference
Mm.
can often be bamboozled by this behavior. Like, what does it matter what, something that seems extraneous to the application to you as an individual? Why is that of such concern to you? And it's because they can't understand the application to self without
Yes.
understanding the broader
They need the
system
whole.
into which it's going, and not only understand it, but to be able to buy into it. And that's
Yes.
also important, this idea that there is some rigor to whatever system it is that they are exploring, and then considering taking on board for themselves. So that's the idea of the complex part. There is,
Yeah.
I think of them as
I've
quite complex thinkers.
complex. Yeah, it's one of the things I've noticed. So they're very big picture. So they need that whole big picture. And one of the things I've noticed in my Seven Steps of Style is they'll want to know how the whole color system work and how does every single color group fit into the whole, just as they probably
Yeah,
would want to know how every single of the the psychological types fits into the whole, and then to
right.
see and then going down into the detail rather than the other
Mm,
way around. And they have an endless search for accuracy. It's got to be right, like it's the most
yeah.
accurate answer. And
Mm,
it's I'll notice that they really want to know. Now they're not going to necessarily follow style rules at all, but they'll want to
no.
know what they all are, and they want to know why.
Mm,
They want to know the theory behind, which is where that theorist comes into their name. Is they
absolutely.
want to know the theory, why, and how everything works.
Yeah, and for them, the theory can be a beautiful thing in and of itself. Other style types often they're vaguely interested that the theory has some validity to it,
Yeah.
but really there it's all about application for them. You know, how can we
Yes.
use it? INTPs are often the flag bearers for making sure that the theory itself is valid and reliable
Yes.
and meets standards of testing and repeatability and
Rigorous.
these. Yeah, all of
Yes.
these kinds of things, and often they can get enmesh in the theory itself. And where they can fall down, of course, we all have blind spots, is in that application piece and actually turning it
Yes.
into reality. Going from conceptual to concrete can often be one of the things that they can have a few speed bumps on the road to.
Yes. Yes. Now, Katrina's asked us, do you have any suggestions on how INTPs can start building a style system? I'm having trouble getting started.
Mm.
And I look, I'm just thinking about this. I mean, one is have a look at what exists now. So there are plenty of style systems around. So there's color systems around, just like there's the Myers, the psychological type or Myers-Briggs system, which we are using here as our framework. I've developed lots of my own style systems, which work really well. And then it's play with it. One of the things I think that's really important with style is to actually spend some time playing. You have to try some things out because you are a unique individual. And so this is where not every rule works perfectly for everybody, because when I look at all the style rules, really they're all guidelines. There's no specific, you must do this, or A plus B equals C. Sadly, it's not quite so mathematically perfect, because humans are unique and there's 8 billion of us in the world. And no two of us are exactly the same. Not even identical twins are actually identically the same. And so it's then taking the sets of rules or guidelines, I always think of them as guidelines, and then applying them to yourself. Doing some research, taking some photos. Photos are massively useful in judging, making decisions, getting more information about what is and isn't working for you. And then creating your own set of rules, your own system out of all that. So this is where it's learn some rules, find the systems, see how things work, do the experimentation. You are, that you're one of the version of the scientists in the world. There are many INTP scientists out there, I know as well. And then it's doing that research, and it's applying some rigor to it and saying, okay, well, I'll try it in this version, and I'll try it in this version, and I'll try it in this version. And if that, that style doesn't work, I've tried on 3 wrap dresses and none of them are good. Maybe wrap dresses aren't for me, and my rules said wrap dresses weren't for me. So now I've confirmed, yep, that one works. But then I might try on something different and go, okay, well, for me that works, and why is that? And so kind of getting to a bit of a level of knowledge around what does and doesn't work. So it's looking at things like, the body shape rules, body proportions, the variations, the impact of your personality, the dressing styles, and all those sorts of things, rules of scale, texture, sheen. I mean, there's a lot of different aspects to putting together style. And I know, Jill, you'll talk happily about how when you'd first learned all the rules, how it was your least stylish episode
Decade.
in your life. Decade of your life.
I'd like to add sorry, go.
Yeah. I know, it's like, that's why you've got to take the rules and personalize them.
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to add a couple of things. I thought your answer was really helpful for Katrina. The first thing I'd say to particularly someone with INTP preferences is define what you mean by style system. Define for yourself. Put some definitions around that so that you know what you're talking about, because you'll be assessing against that. Either consciously or unconsciously, there'll be some form of assessment against that. So having that as a definitional point, also perhaps having a bit of fluidity or flexibility so that that definition can be molded as you develop your knowledge base. And then I would go on a quest. I would go on a knowledge quest. If you have engaged with any of our style type information, say you have your style type report, you'll find on the download page we have 2 resources. One is called your style profile, the other is called Get Traction. They can be useful inputs for you to develop your style system. I would start to create it for yourself, and you may find that one or both of those documents adequately performs that job or needs to be adapted for your particular needs. But we have provided some parameters, some shapes, some scaffolding for people who are wanting to do precisely what you are wanting to do. And of course, Your Type of Style program is exactly that. That's precisely what it is. It's a style system. So that's also another contributor to that answer.
Yes. So yeah, I think hopefully, Katrina, that's helped you. That I think it's really it's finding all the rules, finding out the why, how things work. What if I put this with that? You know, how does it work? Take photos. Photos are such great resources, and I think this is something that everybody can use. I mean, one of the pieces of feedback you've had is that everybody has said that taking photos of outfits makes you more stylish more quickly. Like, you know, if you want a faster road, take the photo road. It's a bit of a pain and all that sort of stuff, but honestly, it really helps you see what is and isn't working for you. And particularly when you can get a bunch of photos and put them together, and you just go, that outfit's so much better than that one or that one. And so you can really start to see, because you need that feedback. It just kind of provides that feedback loop as well. You know, as much as other people might say something or might not, it's not the same sort of feedback as you can do when you're assessing your own photos.
And what I also love about that is that each of the 16 style types has different needs for feedback. We require different things. One of the things you can do for yourself is provide yourself with the feedback you need. So you can use that daily outfit photo process as a way to give yourself what you need, particularly if you're not getting it in either in the quantities or in precisely the way that you need it from other people. So one of the things INTPs will often talk about, or they will have, is sort of a bit of a puzzle mentality. So they like to think of things as being puzzles that can be solved. And you can see your style in this way. In fact, it's one of the things we advocate in the style type report is see your style as a puzzle. See it as something to be solved. And when you approach it that way, you engage the very best. You go with the flow of your own personality. One of the things that can happen, and some style types have unfortunately found themselves in this situation more than others, which is the prevailing style wisdom out there suits a certain number of style types and doesn't suit others. And we've found that a lot of INTPs say that traditional style advice they often find very unpalatable. It just isn't in their currency. It's not in their language. It assumes a certain knowledge, or it assumes that you're on board with concepts that to them are anything but proven. And they just find themselves just disenchanted or outside of the stream a lot of that kind of style advice. So when you put these definitions, turn it into a puzzle and systemize it yourself, you're actually making it work for you. You're having to do a lot of the work, of course, but the benefit is you're getting precisely what you need or closer to what you need.
Yeah. And I think, you know, the INTP is the very epitome of, you know, I'm not wearing fashion for the sake of fashion. Like, I don't think I've ever met an INTP who just wants to buy into a fashion trend just because it's trendy. Like, and
they can even rail against it, which is not to say they don't want to be stylish. The INTPs that I have known do want to be, well, there's an interesting point we'll get to about that, but fashion, not so much.
Yeah, I've certainly met some very stylish INTPs, and I've also met some very unstylish ones. It's almost like that you can get to very extreme ends, and in many ways that the unstylish come because, as you know, NTs on the whole can spend a bit of time inside their head, particularly INTs, I think, can spend a lot of time inside our heads. And so the outer world isn't as obvious to us. And fashion and clothing and style is a part of the outside rather than the inside of what's going on. And what I've noticed is when an INTP understands or kind of grasps the concept that because this is one of the other things I've noticed about INTPs is they are the least likely to judge other people on what they look like. But they also need to understand that pretty much the rest of the population who is not INTP is making judgments based on what you look like. And so sometimes it's going, okay, well, just because I don't do that doesn't mean other people aren't doing that. And that I can get my ideas, are they, you know, heard more easily, taken more seriously, be seen as more credible, more competent, and all those sorts of things that are generally INTPs want by approaching my style in a way that's both authentic, but also that creates a good impression with other people.
And there's the balance point, isn't it? Because what we're all about is authentic style expression, springing from a knowledge of and connection to your style essence and those 16 pathways. And there are two types when we did our research that seemed to have the biggest hurdle when it came to taking on board the idea that style and image matter. And INTP were one of those. And that can often be a long and protracted period that they spend thinking it's not important. And something happens, some catalyzing event happens that opens that door. And then they often become unquenchable searchers, well, searching unquenchably for knowledge. They become intrigued by it and they want to know a lot about it. They become highly engaged in their own way. But they can spend a lot of time in the foyer, if you like, just not convinced that this is actually a worthy pursuit. Or a worthy use of their time. And that idea around tapping into the idea that style matters in a way that's congruent for you, that can often be part of the catalyzing event, as can be external events where your ideas have not been heard, or something's happened in your workplace that's been a disappointment to you because your personal presentation has gotten in the way, or something happens in your personal life, whatever it is. Sometimes it can be the shock of an external event that's caused you to review, how's my style contributing to this? How could I have it work for me?
Yes. It's one of those things that quite often they are quite shocked when somebody eventually points out that maybe it's their image that's holding them back, because they've got the big brain and lots of amazing ideas and lots of capability and all those sorts of things. And so that can often be something that they just haven't given any credence to, that the idea of that their image counts. So I think that's something that's one of their little challenges, but once they're on board, that's great. So what are the other style strengths that we see with the INTP?
Well, they do have this unquenchable thirst for knowledge, and it will differ from woman to woman with this kind of preference. Some INTPs we know, have almost got a PhD in style. The knowledge that they're acquiring is, boundless and it's wide and deep. And others just, there's a certain point they want to reach. They want to know what suits them, what colour suits them. An INTP that I spent some time working with, she wanted to know colour and shape and stuff for presenting at workshops, and that was pretty much it. They were the core key knowledge questions. And once she had that information, she locked it in, and she has, since then just gone forth with that information, confident that she's got her big needs covered. And beyond that, she actually has zero interest in style, doesn't want to, go shopping, any of those kinds of things. She will review, but often needs some prompt to say, okay, has something significant happened? Either a change in your lifestyle, or maybe there's been a body shape or a personal colouring change, or something that warrants a review of this approach that you've been taking. But I would say for women with preferences for INTP, just go with that knowledge searching that is such a strength of yours. Just take it wherever it leads you, and use it as a tool in your style journey.
Yes, they can have a really open-minded way of going about style as well, where they'll often try things that a lot of other people would be too scared to try. They have a creativity there too, where it's a uniqueness, something that expresses who they are. There's often a slight, there might be a quirkiness or an artisticness as well to some of their outfits when done really well as well. It's never cookie cutter. There is no cookie cutter approach to style with the INTP.
One of the intriguing elements of INTPs, just personality-wise, is they can be a bit contrary. And when you know this about them and you assign a positive intention to that, it actually, for me, it makes them very engaging. They're very interesting from that perspective, but they will often take a contrary perspective, not so much a devil's advocate. It's much more ENTP, much more vocal. They're often just much more sort of quietly subversive in their thinking, and that's because they don't think within ordinary channels. This is one of their gifts, is their ability to bring disparate ideas into a system, and they are often the ones who will connect the seemingly unconnectable. When applied applied to style, that can show up in a quite unusual look. For them, there's congruence to it, but it can make for a really interesting look, sometimes a slightly provocative look, but in general, it has something truly interesting and some flair to it.
Yes. So, you know, some really interesting creative kind of pieces to the INTP that others can learn from as well. You know, that being outside of the societal rules or being outside of the kind of standard of fashion doesn't mean you're not stylish.
Yeah.
And I think that's something.
And look, sorry, you go.
No, you go.
I was going to say, for me, because INTP is a four-letter type opposite to my type of ESFJ, and I know that there are some things about the INT approach to style that would be difficult for me or fatiguing for me. So the puzzle thing, I actually get tired just thinking about style as a puzzle. That's just not my way of thinking. But I love the idea, that contrary thing. Really, it makes me sort of go, oh, that's so interesting. I love the idea of being a bit more courageous, or being less concerned about how this might impact on other people, which is of course a core strength that extroverted feeling types like ESFJs bring to the world. So it feels like stepping into new territory, and that can keep style alive and fresh. And of course, the way I might do that will be probably wildly different to how someone with INTP preferences does it. But that idea, I think, is really intriguing.
Yes. So some of their challenges, we've mentioned before, it can be an obliviousness to even being aware of style at all as mattering. Not paying attention, a little bit of kind of one of the things I'll notice is sometimes it's very easy to get a little bit sloppy, because unless it's something that you're really interested in, it's often a set and forget, and then things can get a little bit sloppy and a bit worn out. You don't realize that, you know, an outfit that was great is now a bit worn down, run down, and it's making it look a little bit run down too. So that's one of those things that's worthwhile being aware of, or even things like little stains and spills and things like that might happen, that you can kind of think, oh, who's going to notice that? But other people sadly are.
Yeah, the details are often, you know, true for most intuitive types, and of course the reverse is true when thinking about sensing types, but this is true for a lot of INTPs, particularly if it's around style and you've sort of walked in the door of style, but you haven't really got a full-blown love affair with it. That can be a bit tedious to attend to these kinds of things, and it depends on your outcome. It depends entirely on what you're hoping to achieve and whether that outcome is something you care about and you've connected the way you look to that. So this is where you can get a bit of purchase on the idea that, yes, I'll pay attention to this. I really personally don't care less, but I see that there's a benefit to it.
Frumpy is the word. That's what Katrina's saying. We can look frumpy, and it is true. I've seen some frumpy, but I've also seen some super stylish. It is one of those things that that I think once you get a handle on it, I think this is where, when you can put your system into place, find your system, develop your system, put it into place, and then and review it. And I think that's one of the things that's also important to remember, is regular reviews. And we're talking, you know, like every couple of years minimum, probably. Just small reviews. And it can even be things like, you know, have you had the same hairstyle for the last 20 years? Maybe it's worthwhile updating it every 5 years, or at least every 10 years. You know, like, not everything classic. One of those things that people often say about classics is classic lasts forever. But they don't. If I think about the classic jacket from 1980 something, it had enormous shoulder pads and it was massively boxy. It's not the classic of today. It's not the classic of 1990. You know, it keeps on changing. So some things, yes, they change less than others. But, and also too, is the more creative you are, this is where I always think that, particularly for those types who enjoy a more creative, you know, kind of outfits and looks, often it's more outside of fashion, so it will last longer. Because it's not in fashion, it doesn't go out of fashion in the same way as in some ways a classic will go out of fashion because it's obviously not the classic of today.
But an example of that update process is a woman with INTP preferences that both Imogen and I know and worked with, who had a slight change in her working environment, and she wanted to make sure that her wardrobe was supporting her in where she was going. And I was really impressed with the idea that she, she'd paid attention to it and she'd actioned it, and she really wanted to get that stuff in shape. But it was kind of a one and done kind of thing. Like, I've had the session, I've done it, I've put in place the actions, that's done. Tick, move on to other things. But a really great example of, someone who had tuned into the power that this stuff can have to ease your pathway and whatever it is you're doing with your life.
Actually, one of the things, speaking of this same person, that what I found most interesting is she found enormous value from developing a style recipe.
Yeah.
Enormous value. And one of the things she thought she had a completely different style recipe for her casual life as to compared to her work life. Her work life was in boardrooms. Her casual life was seriously, out in the country.
In the dog park.
in the dog park, or else out camping in the country.
Here's some country.
Yeah.
Sorry, Siri's just telling me they're going to put some country on. Oh gosh.
Oh, a little bit of Keith. A little bit of Keith Urban during the Facebook Live.
Sorry, Siri, turn off the music. Sorry. Oh, gosh.
Oh, I love that song. That's great.
I don't even know how. Siri just decided on my phone to turn some music on.
Oh dear. That's too funny.
Technology. They're not listening.
It was the word dog park. That's what did it. Camping. Camping. You turned on country music.
It was country. I said out in the country.
Oh dear. Sorry.
I turned the country music on. I never asked for country music, but there you go.
Sorry.
But yes, so it was really fascinating is when we actually sat down in real time.
Style recipes.
Yes, style recipes. Yes. Yes, the Buggles and video killed the radio star.
Oh dear.
But yes, so what was really interesting is she thought she'd have very different style recipes. But when we actually sat down and nutted out kind of her personality and what she wanted to express with that, so what the world was picking up about her as a person as a whole, it was exactly the same. And she actually worked it, even though the clothes she wore were very different, it was just a different expression of that same style recipe. And she actually found that, like, she was like going, oh my God, this is so enlightening. And like, it was like she had a major aha when we did that. So I think that was something very interesting, that a style, like a really well nutted out style recipe that expresses who you are as a person, what you want people to know about you. And then finding the clothes that express that, hugely powerful. I think it's powerful for anybody, but it was very interesting at how she just felt this was like a life-changing moment for her.
And a beautiful illustration of how when you are in touch with your style essence, the core of who you are, which your style type report describes, all of the avenues, the different pathways for expression, which can be many and varied depending on your life, they can all stem from that one same place. And this is where congruency comes into it and authenticity comes into it. And this is important for everyone. But for INTPs, they can often be one of a handful of style types who have felt out of step with the world. They are one of the types that once they embrace this, they can say, there's nothing wrong with me. I've always felt that there was, something different about me. We've even heard the word sometimes defective. I am not defective. And this is what can be so powerful for some style types who have felt that they have been more out of step with the world than others. And so can be extremely powerful.
Yes, and I think that's the joy of understanding your type, is actually feeling like you are whole and good. And it's particularly when you're one of the types who is a smaller percentage of the population, where you can feel really like you're a bit of a freak in some way or other, and that you're not like everybody else. And INTPs really don't think the same way everybody else does. Not that everybody else thinks the same way, of course. We all have our own ways of going about it, but can feel less like, when you're a smaller percentage, you can really feel a bit of an alien in the world. And so I think this is where it's that going, you know, I'm just going to accept what my strengths are and actually define them as strengths. And this is something we've talked about with many of the times, that what your strengths are, what you're innately great at, what you find really easy, is not necessarily easy for other people. And so that kind of grasping that your strengths are strengths is also very liberating, I think. You know, that makes life a lot easier.
Yeah, I also find the INTP women that I've known who, as they approach maturity and getting older, they can often be trailblazing when it comes to things like, I'm going to go grey, or you know, I'm not going to wear makeup anymore. I've worn it for my entire professional life, and I've now reached a point where they still want to look good, they still want to be groomed, but they are often the ones who are really quite I think of it as being courageous, because for me, the whole idea of going grey and not wearing makeup, I wouldn't want to inflict that on the world. But, you know, I know quite a number of women with INTP preferences who've they've said, I'm going grey. You know, I've mucked around with my hair my whole life and I'm just not doing it anymore. And they have beautiful cuts and their hair is absolutely stunning. Which is not to say that other style types can't do that, but I've just noticed there's just a certain inner core of strength around it with INTP women.
Like being who you are, and just go, I'm just going to be me, you know, and that's, I think, really important. So yes, are there any questions you have about the INTP and her style? Before we leave you there today, we've been going on for over half an hour now, so hopefully you've picked up something about, you know, both what they're good at and how, you know, you can take a different look. I mean, one of the things I notice about INTPs, they're very much an inch wide and a mile deep. When they get into a topic, they will become an expert at it. And so, you know, you can get right down a rabbit hole with them.
Yeah. And of course, there's upsides and downsides to that. And one of the downsides to it, which we've talked about, and we talk about with every single style type, we always talk about there's two sides to the coin. But one can be that the impact of that behavior on other people can be relatively low, and other people can become disconcerted or confused or even just flat out upset by that kind of pursuit of the truth. But the intention is pure. The intention is gold.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, grey is popular now, Suzanne, isn't it? It's very trendy. Well, it's trendy when you're young. That's the thing I've noticed. As someone who is grey in her 50s, one of those things for all the girls at my hairdressing salon. Oh, I'm going to go with the grey hair look, but they're all 20.
Yes. It's a nice idea until you actually face with the possibility of doing it.
Like real grey versus dyed grey. It's always fun. But yes, it is popular. But yeah, so hopefully that's given you some thoughts. There's lots of resources, and I think that's the thing is Jill and I provide lots of resources for you to use. You know, there's resources of your style type report. There's extra information in there when you get your style type report as well. And then also that, you know, we both have programs that have lots of good information if there's anything in there that, you know, you're after. You know, Jill's an expert on conscious shopping, and I think that INTPs would be very conscious shoppers on the whole.
In fact, they tend to be more browsers than shoppers. They tend to have a fairly long upfront process involved in you know, their acquisition process. So yes, from that perspective, they bring a lot of awareness to the process of shopping.
Yes. Now, Alana's just said, are INTP men similar to women as far as style? My husband's an INTP, and he really couldn't care less. And I think this is where many of INTPs can fall into the oblivious until it's struck them that it's hindering them in some way. They just won't take any notice of it. Because when I said about that inch wide, so what if his inch is? He's really deep into, and style isn't in that inch, is it? You know, and that's why it's completely, it's somewhere out there, but it's unrelated. So it's not usually until some sort of negative things happen or something's happened that's made an INTP realize that it's something they have to take into consideration.
And even then, I know a number of INTP men, and one in particular who had gotten some feedback or gotten the idea that he wanted to improve his image. And without knowing too much about how these processes can work, engaged someone that ended up being not a very good fit for him. And when we were discussing this, he was still traumatized by the process of receiving feedback from an image professional, because it had really wounded him. It had really, really hurt. And that's one of the things that an INTP and a knowledge quest starts where all of us start, from no knowledge. And so in those early stages, for a type that is so focused around competency, that is when they're often at their most vulnerable. And so to feel like there was some form, he felt attacked. That's how, I don't think the person meant to attack them, but that's how he felt. And as a result, has never wanted to go into that space ever again. So this is one of the things that, even though INTPs can seem like, well, I had an INTP say this to me, so I can repeat it back. It's not my words. I know INTPs give the impression that they know everything, but we don't, and we actually know we don't know everything. That's not me. That's another INTP. That's an INTP saying that. They can actually be not as confident as what they seem, particularly in areas where they really don't have any competency at all. And so that's just something to be aware of if you have an INTP in your life, whether it's your partner or somebody else, that they can actually be incredibly vulnerable around this stuff. And taking great care with that, because they can be as hurt as anybody else. And INTPs, along with all NTs, but they have a very core need for competency, and it can be incredibly challenged by this.
Yes. So, and this is one of the things I think whenever I'm working with someone who is this type, it's looking at how can I give you the knowledge. It's about the knowledge and the learning. It's never personal. Like, we're not, you know, like, and there's no assumption that you should know something, and that if you're ever coming from a fashion perspective, it's completely the wrong perspective for them. You know, that it's irrelevant. So it's the coming at the how it's going to make your life better, how it's going to improve your life, and how you're going to be seen as more competent. Because really, that's the thing. It's like they go, I want to be seen as competent. So so it is
but
one of those
also
things.
Oh, sorry. It's also the sciencey stuff to it as well. You know, you can reference, there's particularly color systems, even body shape systems. I mean, a lot of those, the genesis of those is hundreds of years old, where those color systems and, you know, Fibonacci's, you know, proportions and, you know, a lot of that is really interesting to research. Where did all of those theories about personal color come from, or body proportion? Where did that all come from? And that can be a really great entree point, because it's objective. It's not subjective about let's make sure, you know, you look good, but it's about let's get some knowledge in general in place. And then it can be a gentle and sometimes quite a slow process of application, always at the pace of the person. And often that can be something that they want to do privately. I often find that INTPs are the ones that they seem to take these giant chasmy leaps, but they're not. It's just because you just see the things that are on the surface. Everything that's happening below the surface is rich and interesting and often quite complex and intricate. It's just not available to the world because it's a private process. And so that's something else to be aware of. Just because you can't see anything happening doesn't mean it isn't happening.
Yes, it's a very different approach, and it's never about, you know, you should. Don't ever you should to an INTP. I don't think they react to I have a brother who is INTP, and like, you know, my dad's always you shooting to him, and my brother just goes, I'm just going to not do that because he's you shooting at me, you know, basically. So.
That contrary thing that happens there. And for those of you who are saying, well, it doesn't apply to everybody, you should other people. Well, some people love it. The idea that there are clear-cut rules that have you should in front of them is extremely helpful. Now, those people will still take on board that information. Yeah, what should I be doing?
I do.
Yeah,
they beg me for a detailed set of rules.
Yeah. So the answer is no. That you know, stop shooting people. Some people love it. That's exactly what they need.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even though I have heard my INTP brother, you should other people quite a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yes. So hopefully that's helped a little bit understanding the INTPs in your life, or being the INTP, or just even kind of a different perspective. I think they have one of their gifts is they have such different perspectives on the world than the majority of the population. So they can provide a unique view, a different way of being, and actually open us all up to being able to look for different possibilities and answers in a way that they do.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Every time I have worked with someone with INTP preferences or come into contact with them professionally or personally, I have felt enriched in some way. Every INTP I've worked with has been generous in their own way. And what's interesting about that is that shows up for them in a way that might not be how I do generosity, but they're often really wanting to make a contribution. And because they've often felt misunderstood or out of step or out of alignment or quirky or different, being able to meet them on their terms, in their territory, in their language is such a gift, because then we get the best of what they have to offer and they get the gift of feeling like they're understood and are okay for who they are. And every type wants to feel that their contributions are valued for who they are.
Yeah, I think, human need, we all want to be appreciated.
Yeah, for who we are in our unique way. Yeah.
Yes. So we might leave it there for today, unless there's any questions. And hopefully we've had some fun. We'll be back next month with another type.
Yes.
And of course, we love to, hear, and we just love reading all your comments and things on the post we put up there on the 16 Style Types page. Please do like it. And if you haven't got your style type report, you can get it over at 16styletypes.com as well. Bye for now.